Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. Our guest this afternoon is one of the most respected and recognized men in Vermont. As a youngster, he knew he wanted to be a broadcast journalist, and he's now the co-anchor of the very newscast he grew up watching. It is a pleasure to welcome a great friend and journalist, Darren Perron. Thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure, Judy. Always good to chat with you.
Now, you're so proud of being from Vermont. Tell me about your childhood.
I grew up in the Northeast Kingdom, grew up in the town of Barton. Well, we moved to the big town of Barton when I was in 8th grade. We grew up in Glover prior to that. Have a huge family up in the kingdom, and yeah, been here my whole life, born, bred, educated.
Yeah, let's talk about that. You went from Lake Region High School to what is now Castleton University. Who are the people who influenced you along the way?
You know, it's very interesting because when I grew up, I knew pretty young that I wanted to be a storyteller in some capacity. I wasn't exactly sure what that meant, but I knew that I wanted to do some kind of journalism. So when I was a kid, if I was a good boy, throughout the week, then I got to spend the night at my grandparents' house on the weekends on Saturday night. And my grandfather was a huge news junkie. And so every Sunday morning, we'd wake up and we'd watch CBS News with Charles Kuralt Sunday morning. Kind of dating myself here, but so if you know, I was good and I get to spend the night, and I would just watch my grandfather like soak up this information on Sunday mornings, and you know, I think I loved the news more than I loved cartoons when I was that age, and I was little. I mean, I'm talking, you know, I was this big, and I would watch him watch the news, and I just kind of fell in love with that kind of storytelling. So I would say that Charles Kuralt had a huge influence on the kind of journalist I wanted to be. Of course, I never will be, and nobody will ever be Charles Kuralt, but that kind of storytelling really got me going. And then, you know, when I went to Castleton, there are several professors there that really, really inspired me. And then, you know, got an internship here and still here.
Well, before you did that, though, you worked for the Chronicle in Barton. What was that like, working for print?
Amazing.
Yeah.
You know, I wasn't exactly sure, as I mentioned, what kind of storytelling I wanted to do. The Barton Chronicle, I have so much respect for that paper. They taught me so much about what it takes to get a story and to get people to talk to you. Because really, as you know, I mean, the job here is you're basically the liaison of the story. It's their story, you're just telling it, and you have to get people to talk to you. So Tina Starr, Bethany Dunbar, Chris Braithwaite, those folks really sort of shaped how to go about getting a story for me. And, you know, it was a tough decision, honestly, to jump from that paper to come here. I got the call from, you know, our dear friend and who's missed greatly around here, Marcellus Parsons. After I'd been at the paper about a year, he said, come work for us. We'd love to have you. And I was a little like, what do I do? I don't know. I love the paper.
It's
it's so different.
Because you worked with Anson Tebbets, right?
I did.
In Rutland. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I was an intern with Anson. He jokes around about the first day I walked in because I was so nervous. You know, I got the internship and he's down in the Rutland Bureau. And I walked in with like a 3-piece suit and a briefcase, nothing in the briefcase, I should say. It was just like a pen. And but I just wanted to look at what I thought was the part. As you know, though, really journalists are like running around just before the news, we're putting our...
You put your clothes on, right.
So, but walked in, and Anson was awesome. And it was so valuable having that internship because, you know, it was just he and I in the Bureau. And so if he was under deadline, he'd be like, hey, go grab the camera and go shoot the courthouse for me or what have you. And Anson's a great storyteller. And I learned a ton from his style, and he's so relatable. And you could see when folks would chat with him just how easygoing he is, and people love to talk to him, and you know, picked up a few tips along the way.
Talk a little bit about Marcellus, because he hired you, and as anybody who's ever worked for Marcellus knows, he's more than just a boss.
Oh, for sure, and the ultimate journalist and a stickler for detail, spelling and grammar and all of that business. Just amazing, and so privileged, as I'm sure you feel too,
right.
To have worked with one of the greatest. And yeah, when I got the phone call from him, I was, you know, back at home and up in the kingdom, and and I was like jumping around my apartment at the time. I had this tiny little studio in Orleans, and I was just so excited, and I learned so much from working with him. Just an amazing man, became a dear friend,
Yep.
and he's so missed. And that style of journalism is missed, I think, as
Right.
well. You know, it was that sort of tell the whole story, longer format, you know, honest, real, good news.
Now, you took over for Marcellus on the anchor desk at 2009, and you work with Kristen Kelly, who's another favorite. Tell us a little bit about what that's like.
Oh, she's amazing. We're not only co-anchors and colleagues, but we're dear friends. You know, we try to grab dinner at least once a week if our schedules permit it. She's amazing, and she's one of the best writers I've ever met in my life, and total professional. And a lot of our younger journalists really look up to her in her style of writing, and
Right.
and she fits that mold of the Marcelluses. Stickler for detail, making sure you get it right.
Yeah, I also love it when she'd do my script reviews because she'd pick up things and I'm like, oh, right, I need that.
I mean, she's brilliant. She's
Yeah.
amazing.
Now, your professional career has taken you all over the state, the region, even the world. Talk a little bit about what it was like to spend 2 weeks in Afghanistan with photographer Lance McKenzie and how that came about.
Well, we had heard that Vermont was looking at the largest call-up since World War II of the Vermont National Guard, and you know, I chatted with Lance. I said, I think we have to go. I mean, this is going to be huge for our state. It's such a small state. You can't spin sideways without knowing somebody who was affected by that war.
Right.
So, approached Lance, went to the powers that be here, and Peter Martin, who was a war vet himself, was on board. And it took a while for that to come to fruition because there was a lot of logistics that we had to get through, a lot of application process, and because this was, you know, taxpayer funded, we had to figure out how to get there ourselves. So a lot of logistics before we finally ended up going, and I think it was like a Thursday or a Tuesday. I can't remember, you know, this was a while ago, it was back in 2010, but it was either a Tuesday or a Thursday. I got a phone call that said, you've been approved, you're leaving the following Tuesday, and I think it was a Thursday because we didn't have many days to prepare. And we were like, okay, well, this is happening. Got into Afghanistan, commercial flight, because, you know, we can't use any taxpayer money. Had to get all of our own gear, everything like that. Landed there, and I describe it often as a frightening, fascinating, educational, and emotional trip for both of us, and saw, you know, the horror in people and also the great kindness in people. And some of the folks in Afghanistan, you know, it's a really divided country, both geographically and politically. So you could round one corner where folks still thought it was the Russians invading. They were so cut off from the rest of the world. Another corner, folks absolutely in opposition of U.S. troops being there, and then another corner where they're saluting and screaming and kids are running up, and they have virtually nothing. I mean, a lot of these folks are living in basically mud huts. Women are really repressed there, but they were so hospitable. We went into this one really tiny village, and they had very little contact with any U.S. troops at that point. Offered us like one of the last pieces of bread that they had in their homes. And, you know, Lance and I had food and water and whatnot. And so we were like, oh, no, this, you know, please take it. I mean, you know, it was obvious they needed it. But through a translator, because we had a translator with us, they were like, you should
gotta
take it.
Don't insult them.
Yes, exactly.
Now, your work in Afghanistan led to a number of awards, an Emmy Award, a Murrow Award. You've been honored here at home with 7 days as a Best Reporter and Anchor. You picked up 2 more Reader Choice Awards from the Rutland Herald. And not to be outdone, readers of the Barrie Montpelier Times-Argus have also honored you and Gary Sadowski as the Best of Vermont Broadcasters. And those are just a few of the accolades. But there's another award that I know was professionally important to you. Tell us about the story of Christine Hallquist.
You know, excuse me, this was one of the probably, in addition to Afghanistan, one of the stories I'm most proud of, just because it took such courage for, at the time, Dave Hallquist, who's the CEO of Vermont Electric Co-op.
Right.
It's a male-dominated industry, and David, at the time, was struggling, and it was a real internal struggle. He's transgender, and contacted me. I had heard about it. It was so strange because I got the call on the exact same day that that he at the time was reaching out to me, and I knew that he was going through transition. Trusted me to tell the story because this was very difficult on their family.
Absolutely.
So Christine Hallquist now, who still runs Vermont Electric Co-op, CEO, super brave, explained what it was to be transgender, and it's a very difficult thing, as you can imagine. And it was just a real honor to be able to try to walk Vermonters through what this really means and the internal struggle that goes along with identifying as trans and what it means to be trans. And I'm happy to report that she's doing fabulously, that she's been very accepted by the folks at her company, in the industry itself, and I think that Vermonters have really rallied behind her. And yeah, so NLGJA honored that story, I think it was a couple of years ago now, down in Miami, and it was one of my proudest moments in my career.
That's wonderful. Now, there have been some changes here at Channel 3, of course. We know the station's been sold. And I get asked all the time, why have so many people left?
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and what do you say?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I mean, as you know, in this business, I mean, some people are looking to get to
The next
New
step.
York.
Yep.
And so this is a step along the way for a lot of young folks. It's a highly respected station in the country. So a lot of young people try to get here, cut their teeth, learn how to tell stories, and then they'll jump to bigger markets and move on. You and I, Kristen Kelly, you know, we've stuck around. I mean, but there's reason for that.
Right.
This is home for us. I grew up here. You raised a family here. Kristen's raising a family here. So some of us, this is home, and this is where we want to be. For other young people, it's that they just want to move on. And, you know, some folks have left for personal reasons, to be closer to family, for, you know, illness or what have you.
Right.
So there's a lot of different reasons, but it does seem to come in waves. For
Right.
whatever reason, it seems like, you know, it comes in waves. So yes, we have lost a few, you know, dear friends and colleagues, and as of late, but it really has nothing to do with Gray
Right.
purchasing the station.
Talk about some of the changes that this business has been through technologically. It's been unbelievable.
Oh my goodness! I mean, so the advent of social media, for
Right.
example, alone. So now we're breaking stories on Twitter and on Facebook. But you remember, it used to be you waited until the 6 o'clock news
right.
to break the story.
Don't let the cat out of the bag.
Right, exactly. So it has changed dramatically in that way. And the capability of going live at a moment's notice, that was not available, you know, years ago either.
Right, you need a live truck, but now it's a pack that you can carry on your back.
Yeah, it's like this tiny little thing. You can go live anywhere now.
Yeah.
So the immediacy of news, I mean, people have an option to get on 24/7 news cycle. So you have to be ready at a moment's notice to get out there to tell the story, because the viewers are demanding it now. They expect you to be on the story immediately, because that's just what our culture is now. It's you want the story right away.
Exactly. We've got about a minute left. What else would you like to share with folks who are watching at home about your career and the job that you do?
You know, I mean, I look at it like a great privilege. You're invited into folks' homes at the most triumphant times and at the saddest times. And as you know, those are difficult as well for the folks telling the story. But it's a real privilege to live here, to work here, to care about the stories. And I think that's important for folks like us who live in Vermont and you know,
it's
cherish
personal.
the people. It's personal.
Yeah.
You care about what you're talking about. And it's a real honor to work here.
Thanks, Darren, so much for joining us today.
Great to see you, Judy.
That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.